Okay, good morning everybody. My name is Gabriel Dusil. I am the co-founder and general manager of Adel. So I wanted to give you some ideas of really where this market potential is all taking us into the future. Let me start off with really one of the exciting slides is market potential in terms of revenue. We're looking at a market that is going to be about $7.7 billion by 2024. This is according to Grand View Research. And you can see this hockey stick approach to growth. Hockey stick, I think use that analogy nicely here in the Czech Republic. I'm Canadian as well, so that also helps. And you can also see that this is going to be dominated by the fintech space. A lot of fintech projects are dominating the proof of concepts right now in blockchain. Another way of looking at it is in terms of the adoption curve. I suppose all of you are familiar with the adoption of technology, and we can apply this to blockchain. We have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and then laggards. And we see blockchain fitting right in the middle of the early adopters right now. The transition between the innovators to early adopters was around 2013. A lot of people started to click in terms of what this opportunity was all about, and it brought upon some new blockchains such as Ethereum, as mentioned in the first presentation, Waves, several other new blockchains, which we now refer to as blockchain version 2, which really took Bitcoin and the Bitcoin blockchain to the next level and looked at some of the limitations of the Bitcoin blockchain and improved upon them. So the challenge that we face right now in blockchain is really taking this technology into the mainstream. So how many of you actually have heard of blockchain before today? Okay, that's great. How many of your mothers know what blockchain is? So this is the issue, right? We're professionals and we're in the middle of this industry, but our parents don't know what blockchain is, and many of our friends maybe don't know what it is. And to get it into the mainstream, we need to cross this chasm from going from the early adopters to the early majority. And that's really the challenge that we face right now in this industry, is crossing the chasm. We can also look at blockchain from the standpoint of the hype cycle. You're maybe familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, where we have this great hype, and then there's this trough of disillusionment where we go on the downslope, and then it starts to mature. And it's a different perspective on the product life cycle. So we could look at it from that aspect as well, and we're right at the top of the hype cycle right now in 2017 for blockchain. What does that mean? It means that we are going to get a lot of disappointment in the next 3 to 5 years. And one of the reasons for that is that we're looking at a market where there are tens of thousands of proof of concepts in blockchain right now, tens of thousands. As we go through these proof of concepts, there's going to be a lot of disappointment where some of these proof of concepts will not show the true potential of blockchain, but the ones that recover will pass into this plateau of productivity, and those are the ones that will survive. What percentage, we don't know. But we can anticipate, based on this hype cycle, that there's going to be a lot of disappointment, and maybe the media talking about disappointing projects that haven't worked out in terms of blockchain. But the reality is that we anticipate that's going to happen anyway, because it happens with every technology. It's already in disappointment. Oh, right. Okay. So yeah. So we are just falling down from this slope on the right-hand side of that slope, and so likely in the next 3 years that is going to continue, and many of the analysts, including Gartner, believe that it's going to take 3 to 10 years to really mature into this plateau of productivity, and that sinks in very nicely with the first slide that I showed you, which is the fact that we're talking about $7.7 billion market by 2024, which is 8 years away, 7 years away. The reality is that blockchain has this duality of opportunity versus threat. Threats in terms of really how the ideology and the liberalists in blockchain see threats in terms of regulation. There's an ideology which I want to talk about shortly. But before I get into that, regulation may help the growth of blockchain, or it may hinder the growth or slow down that growth. That's a question right now. Scalability is an issue, and that's one of the reasons why there was a SegWit initiative where blockchain split into two currencies. I'm not sure if you were following that, but on August 1st, blockchain split between Bitcoin Cash and the classic Bitcoin. So now we have two currencies, and one of the reasons for that was to address the scalability and to transact all the pending transactions. I believe there's about 200,000 pending transactions. And one thing you may have also noticed is that on August 1st, the value was around $2,000, and it rose to about $4,000 within 3 weeks, because a lot of people were waiting for how this split would pan out, and the value of the currency had doubled and has still since doubled since August 1st. Okay, adoption. Like I said, some of the threats in terms of adoption are these proof of concepts which may or may not do well. And then opportunity. There's efficiency that we talked about in the first presentation in terms of removing middlemen. And that is a big opportunity, one of the reasons why blockchain and Bitcoin are driving the fintech sector. Cost savings by removing middlemen, by using open source technologies and simplifying the transactional open ledger database initiatives in new applications. And one of the biggest ones is really this big data analysis, where we can start to look at the sharing of data on a global basis, and that could really change the landscape of statistical analysis that can help humanitarian initiatives. In terms of blockchain opportunities, we see them similar to the first slide I talked to in terms of the opportunities in finance, ICT, information communication technology, Internet of Things, the e-government initiatives, the medical space, and then each of those areas can spawn other types of opportunities to utilize the blockchain in different ways. I won't get into those in details, but then taking that to a third level of once we start to implement these blockchains on a global basis and we share data on a global basis, there's huge potential in terms of changing society. I want to talk about four main opportunities in terms of blockchain. The first low-hanging fruit, as we say in business, is the online remittance. We're looking at a market where 2 billion people in the world don't have access to banking. And one of the biggest opportunities in blockchain is really in those markets which have no banking capabilities. You're looking at villages in some remote locations of the world that takes a 100-kilometer boat ride to the closest bank, so they have no banking facilities that are feasible for their location. But in their village, they have a cell tower. So with a cell tower and their mobile phone, they can use Bitcoin, buy sheep for Bitcoin, and within, let's say, 40 minutes, have that transacted using blockchain and Bitcoin. And this enables a whole new area for people around the world that don't have those financial opportunities. You're also looking at people, for example, in the Middle East, they're doing construction, they're from India, for example, and their families in India, so they have to send money from Dubai to India in order to send money back that they've made back to their family, but they're paying 30% in transfer fees. Now they could do it in blockchain and have a transaction fee of even less than 1%. So it's 250 times cheaper in terms of transaction fees for online remittance. Second one is smart contracts. This is an area where we can use blockchain as a way to programmatically facilitate an agreement between two parties. Let's say I'm forecasting that tomorrow is going to be 20 degrees. I can do that forecast in let's say a betting blockchain. It becomes 20 degrees, and then based on the blockchain identifying the service that identifies that temperature has been met, then you automatically receive your Bitcoins. Okay? I mean, that's just a very simple example, but this gives you an idea that from an insurance perspective, we can simplify aspects of agreements between two parties from an insurance or a contractual perspective using programmatic code instead of having an individual that facilitates the clauses of that agreement. So that's smart contracts. Now we can look at smart assets. We're looking at a scenario where we have an open ledger of billions of devices that are, let's say, registered on an open ledger blockchain of assets. Maybe it's a printer, and you then register that printer on the blockchain as having specific features, Wi-Fi, color, duplex printing, and so on. You walk into that office, you then register your smart device that you want to print. Let's say it's a smartphone. It then communicates with the blockchain in terms of what the capabilities of that device is. And then because they're both registered on the blockchain, then you can facilitate a local print using your phone. I mean, this already exists from a certain aspect. There's proprietary software that does this, but the aspect that we bring to blockchain is that everything becomes open source and everything is shared not on a company basis or even a country basis, but on a global basis, similar to the removal of borders that the internet does. Okay? And the fourth one I want to talk about is this humanitarian aspect to blockchain. Imagine medical blockchains where we have medical records that are registered on the blockchain in each country. The countries agree to chain their blockchains together, and now we can have statistical analysis on aspects of the blockchain where we can maybe do big data analysis on curing disease, maybe curing cancer. Could be an aspect of where blockchain plays a role. But that is only possible when we can look at the sharing of data on a global basis. What has made blockchain popular? Blockchain is not popular because of the technology. Okay? Let me make that very clear. Blockchain, at its simplest sense, is another database. Okay? Apologies to the blockchain enthusiast if I say that. But it is essentially a database. But it's not the blockchain as a technology that's made it popular. It's the ideology that was created behind it. The ideology of no centralization, no central control, no assumed trust, no proprietary systems, not having a single point of failure, not having middlemen, and not having a big brother to oversee this infrastructure. And that ideology, in some other aspects as well, has created this like, let's say, a technology-based right-wing liberalist society that has grabbed onto this technology and created its own ideology around that. And every single blockchain that's been created since Bitcoin all follow this type of ideology. And that is what has made blockchain a phenomenon today. I came into the industry just when the internet was starting, so I'm much older than many of you. And I haven't seen a technology that has received so much attention since the internet. And I believe that attention is because of this ideology. So blockchain is about programming trust. It's about the ability to have this open ledger that can be audited by anybody. Okay? It's open source, there's redundancy, there's minimal fees, there's anonymity, which of course causes issues with the regulators and so on. But this is where blockchain has taken us and where many aspects of blockchain are taking society into the future. How regulators address that is still an open question. Okay? So we have some issues with blockchain. With a new technology that's 8 years old, coming on 9 years old now, it has its issues of scalability. That's part of one of the reasons why blockchain was split. There's an aspect of mining control. A lot of mining is dominated by around 5 miners right now. There's hacking scandals, which are stealing millions of dollars. So where money is being invested into blockchain is also being stolen, unfortunately. So there's criminals and terrorists. And of course, there's regulations and bans. A regulation can be an opportunity, is also a threat. So blockchain is definitely a disruptive technology. Where is blockchain taking us into the future? We have blockchain version 1, which is the freedom of money. And that's what Bitcoin has created, this freedom of money. Blockchain version 2 is where we're sitting right now, where we're talking about freedom of markets, legal services, Internet of Things, e-government services, and where markets start to share data. And then we believe version 3 is where we share that data not on a country level or a company level, but we're on a global scale. So that's really where we believe we're taking blockchain into the future, and where society is really going to benefit because we're now chaining blockchains and sharing data on a global scale. So let me finish off with this slide in saying that, like I said, I sat in your seat for 20 years, and one of the things I learned is that 9 out of 10 people see change as a threat. Are you the one who sees change as an opportunity? Okay, and I'm talking about change on any scale, from a corporate perspective, from a society perspective, from a blockchain perspective, from a Bitcoin perspective. So where do you sit in this framework of the movers and shakers of the future? Are you going to see blockchain as an opportunity or a threat? Okay, thank you for your time. I'll be here for the remainder of the session, so if you have any questions, then please let me know. But I was very happy to speak to all of you. Thank you.